Welcome to my first ever TikTok live. Wow, I've never been here before. This sounds foreign for me, but I'm glad to be here, and I am hoping that you all are going to have a great time as we talk about the topic of today, which is why your therapist cannot be your friend. Um, I'm gonna give a few more people a few minutes to join, and then once they join, we'll get started. But if it takes too long, we'll get started and then they'll find us continuing to answer the question why your therapist cannot be your friend. So that's going to be the main thing we'll be talking about. Hi Sarah, hi Miss Irene, karibuni sana. I hope you guys have had a great day. If you have, please tell me in the comments so that I know that you guys are doing well. I know some people might not know me, so let me start by introducing myself. My name is Kyalo. I am a counseling psychologist. I am a writer. I run Safe Space Arena, the company that offers mental health services to Kenyans in general and therapists in particular. And our mental health services are for people over 25. If you are not over 25 and you want mental health services, we can connect you to a few of our other therapist friends who can offer you the services that you need. So other than that, we create mental health content, and by we I mean I create mental health content to talk about psychology, talk about our country's status of mental health in general, how people are doing, what is happening in the field, and to answer questions around psychology and mental health in general. And actually, the big reason why I started answering these questions, doing these Q&As, and I've been doing this for a couple of months. I think I've done 7 Q&As up to this point. Oh, this is the 7th Q&A actually on mental health. Is because there's a lot of misinformation on the internet, and especially on social media. And I want to be among the people who curbs that misinformation and just gives accurate information about mental health. Because I spend a lot of time talking to mental health professionals, creating mental health content, teaching people about mental health, reading books about mental health, doing therapy, working with clients. So I feel like I have a good grasp of what works and what doesn't work in most instances. And that's why I'm doing these lives, so that we can demystify mental health, and not just demystify, but also debunk myths that surround mental health, because it's in the myths that we continue harming people when it comes to mental health in general. That is a conversation for another day. Today let's talk about why your therapist cannot be your friend. I'm gonna keep this short, but I'm gonna give you everything that's there to speak about when it comes to why your therapist cannot be your friend. Okay, so a few weeks ago, I posted the video that you must have seen on my timeline about your therapist cannot be your friend. They cannot be hanging out with you at the mall. They cannot be going out with you to places, chilling with you, going to Karura for walks. You cannot be going to Uhuru Park to hang out with your therapist. You guys cannot be going to the mall. You cannot be going together to the movies. Your therapist is not your friend. Your therapist cannot be your friend. And I know that because it's TikTok, I did not have a moment to explain why your therapist cannot be your friend. That's why we're having this conversation. So, as we continue, let me first of all say hi again to a bunch of people who have just joined, and I'm glad that you're here. It's keeping me company. So Miss Irene is here, Sarah is here, who else is here? HK, Amekuja, Nabil, Your Love Jackie, Faith She, Akwapa, Judy, D-Nice. D-Nice, I don't know if that's from that skit by Key and Peele. Kama it's from that skit, Ebuni text oniambie. And then Miss Irene again is here, and Gracie. Thank you guys, and I hope you will get benefit from this. Dora, asante sana for coming to the live, and I hope you have had a great day, you guys, even as we are getting started. This is going to be short. I'll try to make it short and straightforward. All right, so why can't your therapist be your friend? There are 3 main reasons, and I will go through them as quickly as possible. The first main reason why your therapist cannot be your friend is because in therapy, when you're working as a therapist, when you get into the mental health field, there's something that you're taught in school, and it is drummed in you vehemently, if I may say. And it's about what we call dual relationships. So what's a dual relationship? A dual relationship is when a therapist and a client have a relationship outside of the therapy relationship. So your therapist and you being in the therapeutic relationship, that's already one relationship. If your therapist goes ahead and has another relationship with you that is outside of the therapy relationship, so whatever that therapy, whatever what that relationship is, that is called a dual relationship. And in psychology, in mental health in general, dual relationships are considered completely unethical unless there's a very, very important reason why it must exist. And those reasons are few and far between, and I'll talk about them. So, if your therapist is your friend, they are breaking that main rule, that is, do not have a dual relationship with your client. If you have a dual relationship with your client, there's a likelihood that, first of all, your client is going to become confused about why therapy, why you guys are friends. What are the demarcations of therapy? Like, where does therapy start and where does it end? Where does your friendship start? Where does it end, right? So having a dual relationship, and by the way, when you see me looking like huku kando, I'm looking at my computer because I've written these things down. Staki niwapoteze na staki pia I leave out something that is very, very important. When a therapist and a client create a relationship that is outside of the therapeutic relationship, a relationship that is considered a dual relationship, they get to mix the personal and the professional. So you're mixing business and pleasure, which is not allowed in mental health in general. And these dual relationships, the problem with them is that they can make mental health compromise. They can make the client's mental health compromise. They can compromise the relationship. They can compromise the therapist's objectivity when it comes to offering mental health services. As a therapist, I am supposed to be unbiased. I am supposed to be objective. I am supposed to be in a position where I can help my clients without my emotions getting in the mix, without our relationship affecting the relationship we have in therapy, right? Without our problems, my personal problems affecting the relationship in therapy. So think about it this way. If your therapist is your friend, it means you are also supporting your therapist when they're going through something difficult. But in therapy, your therapist is supposed to be supporting you, not you supporting them. So if you are the one offering support to your therapist, you are the one showing up for your therapist. If your therapist is having a difficult day, they are calling you and they are telling you, hey, niaje, but then kama nakapitia leo. Then who is helping who? You know, your therapist is not supposed to be getting mental health support from you. You are supposed to be getting mental health from your therapist. And then your therapist can go to their own therapist and get their mental health support from there, right? They can go to their own friends and get mental health support and get friendship support from there. If they mix you and your relationship, they mix that with friendship up and down, that becomes a huge, huge problem. So you lose your therapist because your therapist cannot be your friend. I mean, I think I've repeated this 10 times at this point, right? As a therapist, we have to maintain those boundaries. We have to make sure that the interests of the client are the ones that are being dealt with in the therapy session. If you come to the therapy session, your therapist, and then maybe you're telling your therapist, wow, this week X and Y and Z happened, I was going through a difficult time, Aki, I was struggling, and then your therapist is like, wow, Aki, same, even me, Aki, I was going through it. That becomes a problem. Because what do you mean your therapist is telling you about how they were going through it? You know, your therapist is supposed to be your therapist, your friend is supposed to be your friend. So don't mix those two things together. Try to make sure that you do not try to reach out to your therapist as if you would be reaching out to your friend. Let people serve different purposes in your life. Again, the therapist relationship is a professional relationship. It's not friendship. You have your friends, your therapist has their friends, and they can figure it out. You can figure it out with your own friends. And also, the other thing is that if you become friends with your therapist, you become very dependent on them to offer you services beyond the therapy services that they can offer you, which are the professional mental health services. So I hope that is making sense. And again, as a therapist, if there's any therapist who's listening, please do not at any point ever confuse the therapeutic relationship with your friendship when it comes to your clients. At the end of the day, you don't want your friendship influencing the clinical decisions that you make in the therapy room. You don't want it influencing the way you address your client. You don't want it influencing the feedback that you give your client. And even think about it. The way that you talk to your friends and the things that you talk to your friends about and the things that the way that your friends respond, the way that your friends hold you accountable or don't hold you accountable, the way that your friends create room for you, create space for you is not the same way that a therapist could do, right? Because again, it's a professional relationship. You guys only see each other at very limited times for very specific reasons. And after those reasons have been dealt with, you go your own way. The therapist goes their own way. They go and get their own friendship, and you get your own friendship. So I think I have belabored the point of dual relationships. Your therapist cannot be a friend because of a dual relationship. A dual relationship is unethical, it violates clinical boundaries, and it dilutes the therapeutic relationship. It can influence the way your therapist, in a negative way, it can influence in a negative way the way your therapist handles your therapy sessions, and it can confuse you as a client about what exactly you guys are doing in the therapy session. So, dual relationships X. Your therapist is not your friend. You guys cannot go to the mall together. You guys cannot go to Huru Park. You guys cannot be chilling at Mendak watch movies at the theater. You guys cannot be going to lunch together. If your therapist invites you to lunch, be very concerned. Be very, very concerned if your therapist invites you to lunch, or they accept your lunch invitation. Be very concerned. What's the other thing? What's the other thing about that you can't do with your therapist? Your therapist cannot be hiring you to do jobs for them. Let's say when into a graphic designer, and then your therapist is having some challenges with their social media posts. Your therapist cannot hire you to create social media posts for them. Hawezi kuandika umfanyie graphic design for their business. Your therapist cannot hire you to do video editing for them, even if you're a video editor. If you're a mechanic, your therapist should not be bringing their car to you for fixing. You know, if you are a teacher, I don't know. I don't think your therapist should be coming to ask for more Kenyas from you. You know, you need to be very, very keen about that. So dual relationships, that's the biggest reason why your therapist cannot be your friend. All right, let's go to the second point about why your therapist cannot be your friend. The second reason is because there's in the therapeutic relationship, there's a very obvious power imbalance. We rarely talk about it, but it is present. There's a power imbalance in the therapeutic relationship, and that power imbalance can make the client vulnerable. And that vulnerability is that the client can be manipulated and taken advantage of if the therapist does not hold boundaries around the therapeutic relationship. So, the therapeutic relationship inherently, it's very unequal. There is a professional and there is the person who is coming to seek support from the professional. This professional, because tumesema hakuna dual relationship, it means the therapist knows a lot about you. The therapist knows about your life, they know about your friends, they know about your family, they know about all your childhood trauma, if you have been honest to them. They know about the abuse you have gone through, if you have gone through abuse. They know about all the things that you're struggling with. They know even your high school teacher and your primary school teacher, anajua mwalimu wako wa math mwenye alikwambia you will go nowhere. Your therapist knows a lot about you. But then, you don't know anything about them. So imagine if the therapist breaks the boundaries of therapy and they start having a dual relationship with you, but you don't know anything about them, but then they know everything about you. Do you see how it's possible for them to take advantage of that if they are violating the boundaries of therapy? They can take advantage of that relationship and manipulate you. Now, I don't want to be a fearmonger. Fearmongera. Is that a word? Ebu mniambie kwa comments kama fearmongera is a word. But I don't know if you guys have watched ile series inaitwa The Shrink Next Door. If you have not, I am encouraging you to go and watch it. There's a series called The Shrink Next Door. And if you're a podcast listener, the series is based on the podcast. So the podcast came first. It was a podcast series, ikaisha, and then it was turned into a film. And not into a film, into a mini series. And I think it's on Netflix. It's called The Shrink Next Door. The Shrink Next Door is about how a psychiatrist took advantage of a client for 30 years. We would say, Ali manipulated this client to the point where the client was ended up giving this therapist almost $3.2 million US in monetary value for services that they were offering. The client was manipulated, the client was taken advantage of, the client was lied to, the client was treated like a child, the client was taken so much advantage of, it was so heartbreaking when you watch that thing. And alafu, the other thing is this therapist, even he was a psychiatrist, and there's a difference between a psychiatrist and a therapist, by the way. Do you guys know the difference? If you want to know the difference, tell me in the comments, nitawambia difference. But this psychiatrist took advantage of this client, and what they did is they made the client add the psychiatrist's children to the client's will. Akamfanya amkwe signatory wake kwa account yake, you know. This psychiatrist took advantage of the client and started living in his house. He was going to his house huko in the Hamptons. Simjoko ni kwa Masos. This psychiatrist was going there and hanging out at that client's house, holding parties at that client's house, taking advantage of these clients kabisa, kabisa, kabisa. And that is because of the power imbalance that I am talking about. Most of us assume that because your therapist is a professional that you guys are like equals. Na sisemi hivyo ati kufanya therapy to look like it's this thing that's where you have to nyenyekea yourself. That's not what I mean. I mean, generally, when there's a client seeking support from a professional, there's that power imbalance by the mere fact that this is a professional, this is a job, this person knows things about you and knows about the field more than you do. So there are many things that they are privy to that you might not be privy to. That is what I mean by the power imbalance. So going back to why the therapist needs to uphold the boundaries of therapy and make sure that you guys do not have a dual relationship and you guys do not become friends. It's because of that power imbalance. Let me read for you what I wrote down. The therapeutic relationship is inherently unequal, with the therapist in a position of power and the client in a vulnerable state. Kumbuka, you're coming to the therapist because you're going through something difficult. It could be that you're struggling with emotional problems. It could be that you're struggling at home. Kuna mtu ana take advantage of you, or you're going through some childhood trauma, whatever. It could be any number of things. So you're vulnerable. Sindio? You're not at your best. Kuna mali unateseka, right? Aya. A friendship could exploit this power dynamic, potentially leading to manipulation or undue influence. The client may feel pressured to meet the therapist's personal expectations, which can undermine the trust and safety necessary for effective therapy. So, ordinarily, when there is a power imbalance, one person is vulnerable and the other person is in a position of power, there is a likelihood that that relationship can be manipulated, and the person who is vulnerable can be taken advantage of if there are no boundaries. And that's why I keep going back and saying, in therapy, kuna boundaries. Now, uzuri hizo boundary is that they are very clearly indicated in our ethics of conduct. Sisi kama therapist, we have a code of ethics that we adhere to. We are taught about it, and it is the one that you uphold when there is a problem in therapy. We will always go back to the ethics to design, was this ethical? Did you do the ethical thing? Now, this is stipulated everywhere you go. Every therapist you work with, they have an ethical conduct. And that's why the relationship needs to be protected like that. I hope it will make sense. So even when you go to a therapist when you're feeling vulnerable, it does not mean that your therapist will take advantage of you. Your therapist can only take advantage of you if they do not uphold the boundaries of therapy. You understand my point? So make sure that your therapist does not become your friend. I know it can feel, the relationship can feel so warm and very intimate, and you guys are so close. You guys are talking about very nice things and some things that are very painful, and the therapist is helping you deal with them, and you're feeling, wow, I am so cared for in the way other people don't care about me, So you start having these ideas in your head that, wow, maybe this person could become my BFF. I promise they cannot become your BFF. And if they become your BFF, they are breaking the boundaries of therapy. If they are breaking the boundaries of therapy, they are getting into a dual relationship. If they are getting into a dual relationship, they are going against the ethical codes that govern the therapeutic relationship. I hope that point makes sense kabisa. Nimeona jamaa hapa kwa comments amesema that you want the difference between psychiatrist and psychologist. So psychiatrist ni jamaa ameenda shule, amesomea medicine. They have a degree in medicine, undergraduate, amesomea undergraduate ya medicine, I think wanasomanga miaka 6. And then they go ahead and specialize in psychiatry. So psychiatry is medicine, but ya kiakili. If they will give you medication. They are the only people who can prescribe medication in most places, especially in Kenya. They are the people who can do clinical assessments and also understand what is the diagnosis that you have. So kama let's say you have like something like let's say PTSD. When you go to a psychiatrist, they can carry out some tests on you and with you, carry out some tests, and then they are able to understand whether you meet the criteria for diagnosis for PTSD. Alafu, they can give you medication to help you manage that. So ni kama kwenda kwa daktari wa kawaida to any clinic you go to, where you go to a clinic, you get a doctor there, they pima you kama uko na malaria, they give you medication. So if you want medication for your brain, you go to a psychiatrist. Anaenda, anakupima, anaona shida pale zimefika, anakupatia medication. That's a psychiatrist. A psychologist, on the other hand, and counselor, you will hear many terms used for them. Psychologist, counselor, therapist, psychotherapist, a clinical psychologist, counseling psychologist. All those names are for mental health professionals who are not doctors. So like me, I'm a counseling psychologist. I am not a doctor. Mi sikuenda med school. Mi nilienda kusomea psychology. So when I'm dealing with you as a client, I won't offer you medication. I can recommend you or refer you to a psychiatrist if I think you need medication, kulingana na venye I am assessing and working with you and seeing where you are, but I will not give you medication, right? So as a psychologist, my work is more of talk therapy. My work as a counseling psychologist is to talk with you, listen to your problems, listen to your challenges, understand where you are kimaisha, understand some of the goals you have in life, where you're trying to go, what is stopping you from getting there. Are you having any problems? Maybe you are having symptoms of depression. How can you manage them without medication? Understand? Because also, not all mental health problems require medicine. You understand? And also, not everything needs medicine all the time. So some people, when they are having like depression, they will need medicine, and then they will also need what do you call it? They will take medicine, and they will also be in therapy doing a talk therapy, what we call talk therapy. So they'll be in talk therapy with a psychologist, and they'll be getting medication from the psychiatrist. Those are two things. So inamaanisha you're using these two methods to deal with the depression. And kuna time inaweza fika, you stop needing to use medication. You find yourself that what you need at this time is just this talk therapy, because your depression has gone down to a place where it is manageable with just talk therapy. So just because umeanza medication does not mean that you'll always be on medication. And just because you are using medication at this time does not mean that that's the only solution. Talk therapy is very, very effective, and not everybody needs a psychiatrist, and not everybody needs a psychologist, and some people need both, some people need neither. Yeah, so I hope that clarifies everything. Let's talk about the last reason why your therapist cannot be your friend, and then we'll be done with this and tutaenda home. The reason why your therapist cannot be your friend is because of the erosion of professional boundaries. So I'm looking at my laptop because I'm reading directly, because I wanted to tell you guys like accurate information. So maintaining clear boundaries is essential in therapy to protect both the therapist and the client. When a friendship develops, those boundaries blur, leading to confusion about the roles and expectations within the relationship. This can create ethical dilemmas, reduce the effectiveness of therapy, and ultimately harm the client, who might not receive the professional support that they need. Tumeongelea history ya boundaries a lot. It's because it is the underlying thing in therapy. Therapy has two underlying things, boundaries and trust. If you don't trust your therapist, hakuna mahali mnaenda. If you guys don't have boundaries, hakuna mahali mnaenda. That is just like basic. Hiyo nayo hata hakuna kuargue, you know. So, if your therapist becomes your friend, your therapist is calling you in the middle of the night ati anakushapia story venye siku yake imekuwa, or you guys have very unstructured communication. At any given time you can text your therapist like you text your friends. Unaweza mtumia message in the middle of the day like, hey, this is what is happening, or whatever, you're updating them. When it's unstructured like that, there's no boundaries there. So if there's no boundaries, then it becomes a problem, because therapy relies on two things, boundaries and trust, right? Your therapist should not be somebody you guys send each other TikToks. Ukiingia TikTok uone kitu funny, unasema hebu nitumie therapist. That is not how it works. Also, your therapist should not be sending you TikToks. Therapist akiona kitu interesting TikTok anakutumia. You guys are having these unstructured conversations on chat as if you guys are besties. That is not supposed to be happening. That is completely unethical. Alafu, you guys, venye nimesema, your therapist cannot be in a relationship outside of therapy relationship with you. So you guys cannot be going out to hang out. You guys cannot be in a romantic relationship. Let me talk about romantic relationship. You guys cannot be in a romantic relationship with your therapist. You guys are dating. That is not therapy. And that is not a therapeutic relationship. That is completely unethical. Don't get into any romantic relationship with your therapist. Actually, if you ever come across a therapist and things escalate to a point where you guys are having romantic relationships, run for your life. That is completely unethical. And then the other thing about the professional boundaries is that your therapist cannot be hiring you to do things, as I've said. You guys cannot be hanging out. And what is the other thing that I wanted to mention? Your therapist cannot be inviting you to events. You guys cannot be going out to lunch. Your therapist cannot be your jogging buddy. Mnaenda jogging, ama mnaenda Karura, ama you guys are hiking Longonot with your therapist. Those are not things that you guys are supposed to be doing. It's again, boundaries. What's the other thing I wanted to say about the relationship with your therapist? Exceptions of where your therapist might be something to you other than your therapist. There are limitations where sometimes unapata it's impossible for the dual relationship to not occur. So think about it this way. Assume kwenyu ni huku wapi? Kijiji, some kijiji in Moyatebere, right? alafu you and your therapist mnaishi the same kijiji huko interior kabisa. Your therapist is the only therapist within 100 kilometers, you know, hakuna therapist mwingine huko. Actually amepostiwa kwa the only hospital that you guys have, and that's the only therapist who is available, and hakuna mtu mwingine, that's the only therapist. This therapist also happens to be somebody who is your neighbor back at home huko kwa hiyo kijiji in Mwetebere, mnaendanga church moja, na pia anakujanga kununua maziwa from your grandmother, and maybe you guys go to the same small markets. Mnajua venye setup ya ushago inakuanga that you guys know each other as neighbors. Ushago watu wanajuananga hivyo, and you guys go to each other to ask for support nini nini. Ushago inakuanga hivyo. So if you're a therapist and you come from such a small place where you're the only therapist around, but then again, other than you being the only therapist around, that community that you serve is your entire life. Like that is where you exist, that is where you live, that is where you go to, your children go to school, that is where your family stays, that is the place you go to church. Of course, mtakutana with these people. In that small market you shall go, mtakutana with your clients, right? So you're not going to avoid your clients, or you're not going to say, sasa moving forward, I will not talk to this client, I will not go to church, nitaacha kwenda kanisa, I will never go to the market because nitakutana na client alafu itakuwa dual relationship. That is not realistic. So you see, some of those expectations are understood, but also it does not mean until sasa when you meet the client, mnasimama alafu mwanze kusema, wa, unakumbuka session last week venye kulikuwa, unakumbuka venye those things we were talking about. That's not what's going to happen. Again, you don't talk about therapy related things outside of the therapy session, again because of boundaries. And confidentiality is a big thing. Alafu, there is another situation where there might be dual relationship, but it is understood, and again, the therapist holds the boundaries. Let's say you are a therapist and you work at a company, right? And in that company, you are the staff therapist. When you handle mental health issues within that company, you offer mental health services to the clients who are to the staff members in that company. Let's say you work at Coca-Cola, you're the staff therapist. Of course, our clients, when you unaona, they're the same clients that work in that office. So your clients become your colleagues, right? Because you guys are hired by the same company. You have the same employer, but only your role is you're the staff therapist, and these other guys are your clients and staff members. So in situations like that, of course, you're going to interact with these people. Of course, you guys will go to the same cafeteria to eat. Of course, you guys will be meeting mkiingia shift pamoja. Of course, you guys will be meeting mkienda tea break, right? You guys will meet in the hallways of the office. So in those situations, of course, it's impossible to completely eradicate the dual relationship. But then that is where this thing I keep saying comes back to boundaries. The therapist holds the boundary. The therapist holds the boundaries for the therapeutic relationship. It is the role of the therapist to communicate the boundaries and hold those boundaries all through therapy. At no point are we going to sit and start accusing the client of violating, of being the one who became friends with the therapist, because the therapist, their role was to uphold the boundaries. So as a therapist, if you're listening and you're a therapist, it's your role to uphold the boundaries. If you are here and you are in therapy and you have a relationship with the therapist that is outside of the therapy relationship, I want you to think very hard about what exactly you guys are doing. And I want you to bring this conversation up with your therapist. Your therapist should not encourage you to be in a relationship with them that is outside of the therapy relationship. Your therapist should not encourage you guys to hang out, to go for lunch. Your therapist should not encourage you ati mwende Gikomba kubai nguo. Your therapist should not encourage you sijui ati mnakutana, mnaenda coffee, ati you guys are going for book club together, you know. Your therapist sijui ati mnafanya hobbies together. Your therapist should not be your friend like that. It is just completely unethical. And venye nimesema, even if there are exceptions, kama hizo zenye nimesema that maybe they work at your office, they're the person that is offering mental health services in your company, ama you guys live in the same kijiji back ushago na unamuona for therapy services, even under those exceptions, even under those circumstances where dual relationships might still happen, it is the therapist's role to uphold those boundaries. It is the therapist's role to make sure that people do not violate therapy boundaries. And that is the only way that you will benefit from therapy, in a sense that you understand there's a boundary. This is where therapy starts. This is where it ends. These are the things that I need to be asking my therapist, and these are things I cannot be asking my therapist. And that is totally acceptable. For the integrity of therapy to continue, those boundaries need to be there. Let me see if there's anything else that I am leaving out. Let's see. Oh yeah, and of course, to wrap this up, just because I've said that your therapist cannot be your friend does not mean your therapist cannot be friendly with you. Being friendly and being friends are two different things. Being friendly is being civil, being cordial, being courtesy, kukuwa na courtesy. You know, those are things that can happen. Being cordial and being friendly like that is totally fine. It's totally acceptable. Your therapist needs to be friendly with you, of course. Ndio mfanye kazi mwelewane. But again, they cannot be your BFF. I don't know if I have left out anything that is important. And if I have, I would want to hear. If you guys have questions, please niambieni. Ebu niambieni kwa comments if you guys have questions before I end this live. Those are the things that I prepared for you guys. Niwaambie why your therapist cannot be your friend. And I hope I have adequately answered that question. Do not agree to be friends with your therapist. Go get your own friends. Na wacha therapist akuwe na friends wake. That is how therapy works. There's a clear distinction between who your therapist is to you and who you are and where the relationship starts and where it ends. There's a very, very clear distinction. And that distinction needs to be upheld 24/7. Something else. If you're not clear about what the communication should look like when you're with your therapist, try to have a conversation with your therapist about the expectations when it comes to communicating. So you guys need to talk about when are you allowed to call the therapist, under what circumstances are you allowed to call the therapist, under what circumstances are you meant to text the therapist, what are the main modes of communication that you guys use. Like for example, in my case, when I'm working with my clients, we use email a lot, but also we use email because we are talking about professional things. Na sitaki kufanya chats with my clients ati WhatsApp tunaambiana story, right? And even if it's WhatsApp, it's for logistics, like session, maybe client anataka cancel session, and so, or ama anataka ku reschedule, ama we are having an internet issue, we can hash it out on like quick text like that. But then ordinarily, we'll be talking on email. Again, there's the expectation that for me, I have a 48-hour response time. So my clients know if they are calling me, I am not going to respond immediately because I can't respond immediately because most of the time I'm in session with other clients. So start a session with another client, nichukue simu sababu client mwingine amenipigia, right? It doesn't work like that because it's not realistic. So what we do with my clients is we have different levels of communication. We have communication when a client is struggling, maybe they are on edge, they are going through something difficult, they're feeling like the emotions are everywhere. I have equipped my clients with enough information to know what to do when they are having overwhelming emotions at any given time. And then if it's getting to a crisis, we have a plan about what they can do when they're in a crisis so that they don't have to struggle on their own. And if they really need to reach out to me, there's a protocol around how they can reach out to me. And then lastly, we have a protocol around when the client is in an emergency. If a client is in an emergency, maybe they are having something very difficult and they want to speak to someone, we have a protocol around how to communicate when they're in an emergency. So that pia client asinipigia saa 9 ya usiku na nimelala and my phone is on sleep mode, you know, and then they are like, mbona ulinighost, mbona ulininyamazia, and I called you when I needed you, right? So that's why we have these levels of communication regarding when a client can speak to you and when they can't speak to you and what you guys can talk about on text and things around that. So talk with your therapist about the levels of communication you guys need to have. Do you when to reach out to your therapist and when not to reach out to your therapist? I also wanted to mention that when you stumble upon your therapist kwa street, let's say when a therapist, you have been doing your therapy sessions, and then one of these fine days umetoka ku K1 umeenda movie nights, and then you find your therapist there also for movie nights. Easy to happen, by the way. Ama you guys are going to I know there are people who have met their therapist at the club. So mmetoka mmeenda club, you meet your therapist there, and your therapist is with their friends, right? Ordinarily, what you do in those situations is that the therapist is not expecting you to talk to them. The therapist is not expecting you to go like, hi, mambo, ati uanze kujiintroduce, ati mwanze kuongea story. That is not what the therapist is expecting. Ordinarily, the therapist is not even going to say hi to you. So for example, in my case, if I meet my client outside of the therapy office or the therapy sessions, tukikutana supermarket, you know, I am not going to go like, hi, how is everything? How are you doing? That's not what's going to happen. Actually, I will not even speak to my client. If my client speaks to me, then I will speak to them. If my client goes like, oh, hi, Jennifer, how is everything going? I'll be like, oh, hi, how are you? And then tuendelee na our shopping. hatutaendelea ati story ati now you remember session venye kulienda, you remember that thing you told me, hiyo kitu ilinisaidia. We will not start talking about therapy related things outside of the therapy session. Yeah, so when you are meeting your therapist, ukuku nje kwa streets unatembea ukutane na therapist wako, usidhani that your job is now to go and start saying hi to your therapist. And the reason is because as a therapist, I know sometimes my clients might not want the people they are with to know that they are in therapy. Maybe at this time they have not told them na assist conversation ta kwanza, cause utaanza kwambia tu yeah, that is my therapist tulianza, and then now like haya uko therapy guy, you know, and maybe it's a conversation you don't want to have. So ordinarily that's why we don't go for that conversation at what's going on, how is everything. We don't go for that. It will just be like hi, and it's only if you as a client initiate it. If you as a client say hi to me, nitakuwa like hi. If you don't talk to me, if you act like you've not seen me, I will. That is totally fine. And Jam, by the way, as a therapist, I will not be angry because you didn't say hi to me. I will not even hata sakwa huko, because I understand. Again, it's that thing for boundaries. Mnasikia venye nashinda nimerudi kwa boundaries, because it's all about boundaries. So therapist wako angojei ati sasa mkikutana kwa street uanze kumintroduce kwa beshte zako, ama mkikutana kwa club ati unaanza kumintroduce unambuy shots. That is not how it works. So you don't have to say hi to your therapist. If you do, it's totally fine, but don't start now at asking nini. Don't start now at having conversations about how the therapy session went, the next session, even if kutaenda, things like that. Avoid. So I think this is a good time for me to come to at the end of this live. I don't know if there's a question I have missed kwa hii chat, so I'm gonna go scrolling kiasi nione kama kuna kitu nimemiss, alafu tumalize hii chat, ndio mwende mfikirie all those things that I have said. I hope I have answered this question adequately. I hope you guys understand why now you can't be you and your therapist cannot be besties. I hope you've gained a little bit of clarity about how therapy works, especially outside of the therapy room. I hope you are feeling that you ukikutana therapist kwa street, hautakuwa confused about how to operate, you know. Kwa hivyo, I hope I have answered you adequately. I don't see any questions in the chat, so I think you guys are doing good. I want to thank you all of you for coming through, and I hope that I will see you again next week. Tutakuwa tukiongea about something else that will be Charles Njonjo. Unasema mimi ni millionaire? Haha, okay. Amen. I hope I will see you again next week and we'll be answering another question. In the meantime, I will ask you to go to our YouTube channel, which is called Safe Space Arena. It is a YouTube channel. You will go there and you will see other videos that I have done. And those videos, especially the Q&A videos, hizo ziko na a lot of questions coming from clients. So enda YouTube, check out those videos. Utaona the Q&A, it's in a playlist. Utaona the Q&A. You're going to hear some of the things that we've covered in the past. And then if you have a question, always happy to answer questions. Please drop them in my DM. I'm always happy to answer therapy-related questions. And then let me see if there's anything else I'm forgetting. Honestly, I don't think I'm forgetting anything. I think we are good. So with that said, asanteni sana for coming through. I can see that you guys really were happy and excited to have this session, and I hope you've benefited, and I hope that I will see you next week as we talk about something else. Thank you guys. I guess this is the end of this. If you have any questions, DM iko open. Alafu tutapatana next week tuongelee another different topic. It's gonna be, I guess, 7 p.m. I think I'm gonna do again 7 p.m. A 7 p.m. live is looking very positive. So I think next week tutafanya another live. We talk about another topic and we answer more questions about therapy. If you have any questions specifically about therapy and mental health in general, please send them to me. I love answering questions about mental health. It's my favorite thing to talk about. With that said, thank you. I will take care of yourselves and I will see you next week. Kwaherini. Bye.